Okay, welcome to lesson 11, point whiz on. We're doing converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Today we're going to be specifically discussing if and then statements. Now there's no shapes, there's no numbers here. This is just basically sentences. It's like going to be like an English lesson, but easier. Today we're just talking about if-then statements. And an if-then statement always has two parts, okay? And you just need to know how to label the two parts. There's a hypothesis and a conclusion. We call the hypothesis the P, and we call the conclusion the Q. All right? An example of an if-then statement would look like this. If I study hard for school, then I will get good grades. All right? My hypothesis is the first part, and that is just I will study hard for school. All right? Our conclusion is the second part. That's what's after the then, and that's I will get good grades. So your first skill is to look at a sentence and be able to pick out the hypothesis and the conclusion in any if-then statement. So in this case, the hypothesis, which came after if, is I study hard for school. Oh, let's do that in blue. Keep it consistent. I study hard for school. And your Q is what comes after then, which is I will get good grades. If you can identify your P and Q for a sentence, then you're going to be just fine in this lesson. Remember, the P is after the if, the Q is after the N, then. So let's talk about converse. All right, a converse statement is made by switching the order of the hypothesis and the conclusion. So what does that mean? Oh. My original statement is this. If I study hard, then I get good grades. All right? So let's first label our P and Q. Our P comes after the if, so it's I study hard. That's our P. And our Q is after the then, and that is I get good grades. The converse statement is just by switching P and Q. So it's if Q, then P. All right, I just switched these up. So what would that look like? Well, I'm going to put my Q first. If Q, all right, if I get good grades, and then we switch our P to the back, then I study hard. Now, if you look here, these sentences basically mean the same thing. If I study hard, then I get good grades. And the converse, if I get good grades, then I study hard. All we did was switch the P and Q. So let's try an example of this, okay? Write the converse of the following statement. The statement is, if I work out, then I have big muscles. So let's first start by labeling our P and Q. Our P comes after the if, so it's if I work out. And our Q comes after the then, and that's I have big muscles. Our converse just comes from switching the P and the Q. Did I write P there again? Whoop. So to write out our final sentence, it would be first the Q, then the P. So if, all right, I have big muscles, then, all right, and we're going to put the P now first. I work out. And you see, we just switched the P and Q. Okay, let's keep moving on. Before we move on here, I just want to do a quick note on what a negation is. It's very intuitive, but just to tell you what a negation is. A negation is just when you put a not in front of something. So let's start with our statement. Mr. Siegel is cool. All right? The negation of that is Mr. Siegel is not cool. So the negation is just putting a not in there. See? It negates it. Now I want you to see something here. This is going to be a question that you see in your practice notes, so just pay attention closely. A negation changes the truth value of a statement. What does that mean? Let's start with this. Mr. Siegel is cool. Well, that's obviously true. All right? So the opposite of that, Mr. Siegel is not cool, must be false. So when you negate something, it changes the truth value. All right, so if it was true, then it becomes false. And similarly, if the statement was false, then it becomes true. So negations change the truth value. This will be in your independent practice. Take note. Okay, so let's talk about inverse. An inverse, on the fly, making these changes. An inverse statement is made by negating the hypothesis and the conclusion. All right? You just negate the hypothesis and conclusion. So let's start with our original statement. If I help old people cross the street, all right, that's our P, then I am a good person. That is our Q. The inverse would just be the negation of both of these. So for this example, if I don't, see, I just negated this, help old people cross the street, I don't have room, cross the street, then I am not a good person. So to be clear, the inverse is just the negation of the firsts, the P and the Q. If I don't, so look at this. If I help old people cross the street, then I'm a good person. That's our original. Our inverse is the negation of P and Q. So if I don't help old people cross the street, then I'm not a good person. See how they both make sense? They say the same thing. It's just the inverse. So let's try an example of this. Write the inverse of the following statement. If I am smart, then I think The Avengers was a good movie. So we have our P and we have our Q. All right, and now we just have to rewrite this and negate both the P and Q. So if I am not smart, see how I negated it? Then I didn't think The Avengers was a good movie. Sorry, I write very slowly. So you see, you just negate both of them. If I am not smart, then I didn't think The Avengers was a good movie. I've negated my P and I negated my Q. All right, the contrapositive. The contrapositive is the last one we're going to be talking about today, and it's just a combination of the converse and the inverse. So a contrapositive is a statement made by switching and negating the hypothesis and conclusion. So it's really just a combination of the converse and the inverse. Okay, so we're going to do both. So in our first case, our original statement is, if I have a girlfriend, so that's our P, then I am happy, and that's our Q. All right, and I do have a girlfriend, so I am happy. But the contrapositive is going to be first, I'm going to switch them and then negate them. So I am happy, it's going to go this way, and it's going to be if I am not happy. So you see what I did there? I took my Q and I negated it, so it's not Q. So if I am not happy, then I don't have a girlfriend. So it's both a switch and negation. All right, you do both in this case. So let's try one final example. Write the contrapositive of the following statement. If I eat a lot of candy, then I am fat. All right, so let's do the contrapositive. This is my P. This is my Q. So it's going to be not Q first. So if I am not fat, I am not fat. So you see how that's not Q. Then I don't eat a lot of candy. And that's it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was like riding a unicorn over a rainbow into the sunset.